Welcome to Rooted to Thrive, conversations to elevate our humanity. I'm your host, Rochelle Peterson Ansari, Professor P for short. This is your podcast sanctuary for cultivating mindsets and skills to elevate our shared humanity. We're taking a deep dive into practical strategies to evolve as anti-racist, culturally competent, and inclusive individuals and leaders. In each episode, we're bringing you real-world examples and actionable takeaways. We're going to talk about personal growth, fostering connection, and creating positive change that dismantles systemic barriers and creates environments where all of us are valued, empowered, and activate our collective power. This is Rooted to Thrive. Hi there, and welcome back to everyone joining us on the Rooted to Thrive conversations to elevate our humanity, where we are discussing practical ways to become more open and receptive to human diversity in our personal lives, at work, and in learning environments. I'm your host, Rochelle Peterson Ansari, aka Professor P. Now today, we have Dr. Vernese Edghill Walden, who is a transformational leader and who is committed to advancing equity, inclusion, and belonging in higher ed. She's been doing this work over 35 years. It's actually more than 35 years, because if I'm over 35 years, she's over 35. Okay. And she's currently the inaugural Vice President of Equity and Inclusive Excellence at our alma mater, Bucknell University. Ray Bucknell. And she has also been an inaugural Vice President for Academic Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Northeastern University in Illinois. And she's also served as the provost. She's led human resources, institutional research teams in colleges. And then she's also led DEI, or Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, at schools and at the university level. So Vernese, she's also one of my early career role models, which I'll share a little bit about a little later. So Vernese, thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
Thank you for having me, Rochelle. I am delighted to be here. I'm doing well. Doing well.
Awesome. So before we jump into your topic today, thinking out of the box, practical steps toward equity-minded leadership, I wanted to take a moment to share something with you and our listeners, because it's relevant to the cultures and values communicated in our institutions, how we carry racism and other forms of oppression into every room with us, and how our social identity development influences our experiences on predominantly white campuses. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Sure.
So you and I first met in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, 40 years ago. 40 years ago, yes. It's been 40 years since I started college. And you were a sophomore when I arrived on campus at Bucknell, and you were one among the 25, I think I have that number right. It was like 25 Black students on campus at the time. I guess I counted in the 25 too. And now we have a lot of stories about our college days, especially about working and playing hard in the Black student community. But yes, I bet you don't know how your presence and your choices as a student are part of two key moments in my racial identity and academic development, as well as my early career choices. Now, for the sake of time, I'm only going to share one key moment. And that experience, I recall, was when we both majored in sociology.
Yes, we did.
I don't know if you knew that from the door. I didn't. I came in bio pre-med. And
no, I didn't.
Okay. And I found sociology. I found my home there. And it was my sophomore year, and I guess your junior year, where we were taking a quantitative research methods course together. And we were in class, and you just kept asking all of these questions all of the time. And I remember feeling embarrassed at first, right? Like thinking, now, there's only 2 or 3 of us in here, meaning Black students, right? And they, the infamous they, the white folks in the room, the instructor, the other students, already don't think we are competent enough to be here. Now, just to say, I don't know that that is true, but that's what I felt, right?
Yeah.
And I just kept thinking, why is she asking so many questions? So at the end of the course, though, you get an A. And let's just say I didn't. Although I had a B or a B plus. But from that moment on, I vowed to follow your example.
Wow.
So when I didn't understand, I asked questions, despite what anybody would think. That was the good news, right? The not so good news was that that moment demonstrated how I, as a Black person, had internalized that I had to prove myself to white folks, and it affected how I operated as a student. And that's the stuff that people don't take the time to talk about. Right?
True.
Right. So it is an honor to reconnect with you now, think out of the box together so many years later, and to inspire, hopefully, equity-minded leadership. Even if we reach one out there, we've done our part.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So to get started, can you please share a bit about your background and how you became involved in this work?
Sure. So again, thank you. I would not be who I am today in terms of being involved with equity work and even thinking about equity-minded leadership if I didn't have those out of the classroom experiences and even inside in the classroom experiences. And I think a lot of it happened in sociology classes where I was learning about inequality and understanding systems and how systems work and don't work and who they work for and who they don't work for. And it's just, it really inspired a lot in me, inspired a lot to learn, realizing that. And one of the things that we realized was that if we wanted more, we needed to say we wanted more, and we needed to use our voices and our talent to not just say we wanted more, but to provide evidence of what more would look like. And so that really inspired me. And I remember talking with someone in the student activities office saying, do you do this work for a living? Can you get a master's degree in this work? And Ruth Burnham, who I'm still in contact with today, exposed me to the Association of College Unions International, all the different higher ed professional organizations. And just the rest is history. That's how I got involved in this work, realizing that if I wanted to do this, if I wanted to advocate for myself, if I wanted to make sure that Bucknell was a different place or a better place, that as a student, I had a voice, and that voice could also be translated into a professional career that could really support and enhance students of color's lives at predominantly white institutions.
All right, excellent. Yeah, some of the same work. Boy, that name just can't. Ruth was in student activities, right?
Yes.
Yes, I worked in that office. So yeah, so she's been pivotal in both of our lives.
Yes, yeah, we still stay in contact.
Yeah, oh, that's wonderful. That is wonderful. So I'm going to pivot a little bit to your professional insights now, right? And share with us a little bit about, first of all, what do you mean by equity-minded leadership? Can you define that for us?
Sure. So, one thing that I think a lot of people get confused is the difference between equality and equity. And I always say that equality doesn't necessarily achieve what it is that we want or that we need. And so when you think about equity, it's like really giving people what it is that they need, and not everybody needs the same thing. And so you want to make sure that you give you want to be able to make sure that people have what they need. And as a leader in higher ed, I think that for years, we've always done this blanket, let's just give them all of whatever that is, and then everything will be fine and we can move on. But that's not the best. It's not the best outcome for all the students or the staff or the faculty.
Now, you mentioned that you do assessment, right? So that's a first step for you to do an assessment of various communities in the institution. What does that look like, right? Like, so help the novice leader visualize how they might go about assessing the needs and of various communities. Because I also want to just inquire, right? Because if you are at the institution for inclusive excellence, are you only serving the students of color?
Right. Absolutely not.
Right. So yeah.
So I think it's really making sure that you have a broad understanding of what student populations that you have and what it is that they need. And the reason why I say that is because I think there is a misnomer that, if you're doing equity work, you're only thinking about Black students or students of color in general. But in actuality, you're thinking about students with disabilities. You're thinking about students that come from the LGBTQ community and international students. You're also thinking about white students, as well. And the thing that I think we miss is many of our students have multiple identities. So they're not just one identity. They could be a person with a disability who's queer, who's Latina. So you can't just say this one person only needs to be involved with the Office of Accessibility Resources.
Yeah, and so when I'm going to circle back to that question about the needs assessment, right? Like, so what are some of the things you do?
Sure. So, one thing that it sounds pretty basic, but it's really talking to people. You'd be surprised how many programs people create without asking, what is it that you really need? And so when I say assessing, it's really spending time with students, faculty, and staff, understanding what their needs are or have been, and also understanding perhaps what they might have been saying that they needed all along, but nobody may have been listening. And then working on fixing that, right? Which is a good practice, is looking at policies that could really impact different communities in different ways. And if you just change that one policy, you're not just doing it for one group. You're really doing it. It's like a universal design. When you change something for one group, you're really making it better for all. I've only been at Bucknell for a year, and so I see potential of things that could happen. But I have countless stories from other institutions.
Yes.
So I would say when we started, and when I was at Northern Illinois University, we started doing gender inclusive restrooms. And everyone thought, well, you're only doing this to support the LGBTQ community. And why do we need so many? I mean, this was you would have thought that it was just, something that unheard of, that no one else in this world would have known. And so once we started explaining to the community that this wasn't just something for one group of people, but this would serve the purposes for perhaps dads who have little girls who they need to go in the restroom with them, or someone in a wheelchair, or it could be for someone that is trans that needs to feel comfortable going into a restroom. And I'm going to tell you, the resistance that we got initially was from the facilities that were saying the plumbing codes that were created in 1920 say that you have to have a certain amount of toilets for women and urinals and I was thinking that's 1920.
Yes. And you know, that makes me think one, it's fabulous, and many initiatives do just that, right? They enhance the experience for everyone or for many,
Absolutely.
many more groups. However, it is still okay if it was to be inclusive only for the trans
Absolutely.
and non-binary community, right?
Absolutely.
And I have to say this, right? So every time we talk bathrooms, I remember my experience as we actually transitioned at an institution where I worked, and I personally, and I think it's because of my history, right? Like, so as a female being attacked as, you know, as a female by males, I had trepidation about going into the bathroom. Now, our bathrooms were set up so that they literally changed locks, right? Like they just put a lock on it. And so if you did not feel comfortable with somebody coming in that may not be of the same biological sex, then you could lock the door, right? That was my choice, although I stood firm for the rights of our trans, you know, of our trans
Absolutely.
binary community. And so,
Absolutely.
right, because I have my story, because of course, like people of different genders, of different biological sexes use the same bathroom all the time. We do it in our families.
All the time.
But the reality is that, you know, because social violence does exist, right? For some, I'm sure there are other reasons, but in my case, that was something that gave me trepidation just about using.
Oh, absolutely.
And we had other options as well.
Right.
So, right. Yes.
Yes. So I was going to say that the option piece is also the thing that you have to remind people of. Like, this is not something where we're saying you are being forced to do something or do anything. You have multiple choices, right? And that is something that we needed to remind people of. Yes. I will also say that I think that when you thinking back to your title of the series around humanity, when you tell a person's story, a trans person's story about not feeling comfortable being able to go to the bathroom, not any bathroom, but going to the restroom is important to hear and to understand that person's, not that person with that's trans, but that person's reality. Yeah. And that's the kind of work that I love to do, because what to someone might feel like it's impossible because they've been asking for so long and nobody's listening. And so the simple conversation of tell me what it is that you need and let's fix that is what is so important in this work. And part of your work is to work with your colleagues to gain that ear, gain that same sensibility, so Absolutely. That eventually there is not a need for Absolutely. For your role, right? Right. I should be working myself out of a job. Yes. Thank you. We said the same thing. I don't, it must be something in the water in Lewisburg. Because we haven't really talked, but we talked, you know, once or twice in the last year. But it's really been this stretch of time, decades, and we're saying some of the same things. Same things. Yeah, something's in the water. So when you talked about this equity-minded leadership, you talked about talking to people, first of all, collecting stories, right? That those are non-traditional, I guess, strategies, because you say there are so many people who will create a program or start an initiative and not talk to the people they're creating that program or initiative for. And it's always for some students, right? So we should be talking to the people regardless, even if it's an initiative for staff, faculty, you know, anybody, right? We need to talk to the people. Now, those are a couple of ways where how I hear you describing equity-minded leadership.
Now, you have suggested that it's different from traditional notions of leadership. Can you expand upon that a little bit? How is equity-minded leadership different from traditional leadership?
Sure. So I think that traditional leadership really looks at the whole. Like if we can think of a few things that we can do that may help some of the people some of the time, or we can continue down our traditional path of this is how we orient students to college. You know, everybody's going to get the same information. And equity-minded leadership says all those things are great, but what else would make someone feel like we see them, that they would feel visible here at any institution, not just at Bucknell. So what is it that can we do to make sure that we are meeting the needs of those individuals or those communities, and we do it in an equitable way?
Right. So I'm thinking about institutions that would have some of the challenge that Bucknell has had over the years, right? They're in central Pennsylvania, not right off the beat. They're not on the beaten path for many people of color. And so in terms of recruiting people that come from places like Brooklyn, New York, like I did. Now you weren't.
No, I was in the Poconos, but
you were in the Poconos by then.
Yeah, but raised in Brooklyn enough to know that Lewisburg was a foreign land.
Yes, it was a foreign land, right? So you're trying to get people from all different walks of life, and you know, so that the students can have this experience as well, right? People from urban and rural areas and suburban areas, etc. However, so you're saying like this person that might run an orientation program might need to know that, hey, there might not be hair products.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Or a hairdresser or a barber.
Yes.
Or the food that you like to eat, or the snacks that you want to have. And so I can give that as an example as well, because you know, when we share with the community here, faculty, staff, and students, that it takes 5 hours at the very least or more to go get your hair done, because you have to leave Lewisburg, drive 3 hours, then get your hair done, which could be another 5 hours, and then drive back. Okay, that's a day and a half, or at least work time, right? So one of the things that, an example of being more equitable, is that we are currently in the process of getting a vending machine where we can sell hair care products, so that when you do need your hair done, that you can get the gel, the hair grease, the hair. You know, and the student, you should see the students when we tell them this. We've asked them to provide a list of the things that they want, so much so that I think we might need 2 vending machines. 2 vending machines. But I think that's an example of creating a way in which the institution can say, we see you. And we also created an opportunity. We just got a new dining contract. And in that dining contract, we said we wanted to have a cultural liaison representative in the dining service, so that they could work with our student groups, our culturally diverse student groups, to make sure that the food that they are cooking for the events, you know, when we used to celebrate Kwanzaa, which we're trying to do again, at Bucknell, we cooked that food, right?
Did it. Yep.
And now we want the dining service to be able to cook the food, or have the ability to bring in a caterer if they can't.
Oh, wow. That's excellent. And you know, for the Indian student, the student who, right?
Absolutely.
Students, yeah.
And the snacks that the Latino community wanted, that they were traveling an hour to go for, or our international students who wanted Asian cooking supplies, right?
Mm.
We wanted to bring those things here. We also added these markets on our shuttle service. So Bucknell has a shuttle service. They didn't include those, maybe a trip to a State College where you can go and get your international food products. And now
Okay.
we're thinking about ways to do that. And
Like on a
so,
regular basis.
right. And this is, again, another example of if we just think outside of the box.
Right. You have the resource already.
Why not?
That's right. So,
I would say that I would just I mean just I would say that Bucknell is not unique in that. I think that there's a lot of institutions that are trying to figure this out. And so it's not like Bucknell's the only institution, it's the first, we're the last to get a vending machine. No. This
no.
is this is new ground for everybody.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we didn't even think of something like that when we were in school, right? I mean, even for ourselves, right?
Right.
So,
No, we got in the car and drove the 3 to 4 hours to do what we had to do.
yes, we just like sucked it up, said, let's go.
Absolutely.
And just suffered in between. I had a Jerry curl. Ooh, that thing. Okay, when you run out of that solution.
Right. Yeah, there was none to you couldn't go to CVS. No.
Just had a front. Just had a front. So, oh my goodness. Those were the days. But
They
anyway,
were.
those are some great practical strategies. And we've talked a lot about students' lives outside of the classroom. I'm curious about your work in diversity, equity, and inclusion on the academic side as well. And again, doesn't have to be about Bucknell, but what are some of the practical strategies leaders and educators can implement to challenge some of the norms that they faced that you've seen at various institutions?
Yeah, so I think it's really your story. I was thinking while you were telling your story about how I, that was my junior year. It took me, I just want to go on record as saying it took me 3 years to feel like I could answer those questions. And so part of what I often share with people, faculty in the classroom, is how do you create the environment in the classroom where it doesn't take someone to their junior year to feel like they can ask those questions. By the time I was a junior, I felt like this was my space, right? I did belong here. And not always, but in certain spaces, I did feel like I could ask those questions. But I know for a certain fact that my freshman year, I would have never done that, ever. And I struggled. And so I always tell people that that struggle wasn't that I wasn't smart or that I couldn't do the work. I just did not feel like I belonged there. And I did have major imposter syndrome, right? Where they're gonna find me out. Like I am not supposed to be at Bucknell.
The message was coming from somewhere though, right? You didn't
Yes.
just dream that up.
And I think it was because I did not grow up in this very wealthy, affluent community, right? Where my peers, my white peers, were feeling very comfortable in their skin and in that environment. And I was feeling like I can't ask a question because they may just find out that I don't know. And so it took me a long time to get there. So I share that because those are the stories that I share with colleagues and faculty when I'm talking with them about how do you create spaces in your classroom where students do feel like they can show up and be their authentic selves. And so prior to that, I didn't always feel like I could see myself in the classroom. But I found that when the faculty were sharing with me about things that I knew and I could resonate with and understood, I was like, oh, yeah, that's my life. I remember reading All Our Kin by Carol. I still have the book. And it talks about, just Black tradition and the welfare system and all of these things. And I'm thinking, these are real life stories that I understand and know. And my family wasn't part of the welfare system, but I knew, like, these stories that were told about our community, I could understand it. I remember going to English class and I had to read Frankenstein, and I was like, what is this? Who does this?
Right. Right. And it doesn't matter what discipline it's in, right? They can tell, it's easy in English, sociology, the humanities to talk or in the social sciences to talk about one's autobiography, right? Like a lot of people do that, but you could tell your math story in mathematics, right? Chemistry story. You could tell any story, and the experts in those disciplines know better, better examples than we have.
Yes.
But they can connect to real lived experience.
Yes.
To get to know their students.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think about an example of something that when I was at my previous institution, where we had a postdoc graduate student who came to teach, and one of her best practices, which I loved, was it wasn't so much I'm going to teach you about the influences of people of color in chemistry. She might have done that, but she also wanted people to know that she would meet you where you were. So she would have office hours in our cultural centers. So imagine if we had a professor that said, I'm holding office hours at 7th Street House. Or I'm holding office hours at Edwards House, right? That's a space where you can call home, where you can feel comfortable. I might have felt more comfortable going to a faculty member in 7th Street House to say, when I was a freshman, to say, I really don't know what you were talking about yesterday.
Right. And
then I would have in their office or staying after class to say, I'm sorry, can you repeat that again?
Right.
And I found that in that particular instance, she found that those students performed better, they were engaged more, and they felt a sense of connection to that faculty member.
Yes.
Because she met them where they were.
Yes. And you will notice that while, this is one of the arguments for having, for the benefit of students of color, having other students of color, for the benefit of LGBT students, having LGBT, faculty and staff and so on and so forth. And, people with disabilities, we could go on and on and on. But the reality is the race, the sexual orientation, the gender identity doesn't matter. Meet the students where they are.
Period. It doesn't matter.
Yes, because we will walk through walls for you.
Absolutely.
And we see that you make a modicum of effort, which is to just move from one building to the other.
Simple. With authenticity, right?
Yes.
Like genuineness, I care. Like
that's
that.
Right. Yeah, that I care. I know. Well, they know that there's a reason why you wouldn't come down the corridor.
Absolutely.
Always going to the people. It's interesting, when I was in student affairs, I've been in both academic and student affairs. And when I was in student affairs, I was head of multicultural affairs, some years ago. And I remember having the experience where someone was actually questioning why I was out of the office so often. I was like, I'm on campus. That's where the students are. Right? Absolutely. Like off or
Right.
on. I literally was on campus. It was automatic. You go to the students.
Absolutely.
And they,
Absolutely.
yes, and it just sets you up for when there is time when they absolutely need you, they'll find you.
Absolutely. Building that trust is really, really important.
Yes, it is.
You
Yes.
know, because I can count on one hand how many people we trusted.
Listen, you know, our experience at Bucknell, first, let me just back up a little bit. 7th Street House and Edwards House are the African American Studies houses.
Mm-hmm.
7th Street House is the African American Studies House for women. Edwards House is the African American Studies House for men. Now,
Mm-hmm.
what you need to understand is that it's for the study, the celebration of those cultures and cultural groups. Yes, everybody who
Yes.
lives there was not Black. Or African American, even, right? Like we had Africans, but we had white folks, we had Latinos, right?
Yes.
The bottom line is you were interested in the culture, but and also you were comfortable, right?
Yes.
Like it was a place of comfort.
Yes.
So it was an affinity space that was completely necessary. And
Still is.
Yeah, it still is. And we absolutely needed to take care of ourselves because we did not have some of the supports consistently. You know, life happens, some roles on campus, people who were there to, their role was specifically to work on our concerns. That role was like a revolving door for a period of time when we were there. Yes. We just had to take care of ourselves.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And we did that. And there were significant, I could say with the number of us on campus, and maybe because they were really generally in the departments where you and I took classes. So it wasn't the case necessarily if we were in the sciences, but we had several faculty of different backgrounds, persuasions. Carl Malofsky was my advisor, and he was my secret crush. I will say it. And there's this Jewish guy that helped open up a new world for me, right? In sociology. He was my advisor, but also gave me the opportunity to be a teaching assistant as an undergraduate.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So I learned how to create field notes and grade field notes as a junior.
Wow.
Yes.
That's awesome.
It was awesome. Yes. And those experiences like with Dr. Smith in African American women's writers courses. Yes. Something opened up in me as well. I talked about that in a recent book chapter that I wrote, right?
Yeah.
That when we talk about children, young adults seeing themselves in the curriculum, I understand the reason why.
Absolutely.
It helps you feel like you're normal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because you have something to contribute. You have a reality that is honored.
Yes.
And not seen as a deficit.
Exactly. And people, I learned in school that people who were important wrote books, and people who were important were the people written about in those books. So when we don't see ourselves, we think it reinforces that deficit perspective, and unfortunately, we can internalize it.
Absolutely.
Yes. Right.
Absolutely.
You talked about familiar experiences. It also opened up for me, like I felt like some of the stories I was reading, people were giving voice to some things I didn't think I had permission to talk about.
Whew, there's that. Yes.
We were Gen X. And in Gen X, children were seen and not heard. And
Yep.
that's, part of a burden that we
Mm-hmm.
experience that I hope many of us have grown from and don't replicate with our children.
Right.
It
Right.
is what it is, but it helped silence many of us in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
The awakenings that you expect on college
Absolutely.
campuses can happen as we help students see themselves in our
Yes.
curricula.
Paula Gittins is Where and When I Enter.
Yes, Paula Giddens.
Paula Gittins. I'm like, I
That was
know that name of that book.
Gloria. That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
it's Paula Gittins.
So this has been an absolute pleasure. Every time I go down memory lane, I'm like, oh, excuse me. I don't mean to say that I had a terrible experience in college because I didn't.
Mm-mm.
But I do understand it's like something in the air that you experience where
Mm-hmm.
you know that something's different. And
Mm-hmm.
those things that we talk about not feeling like we belong, right? Uh,
Yes,
and unfortunately, so many students are saying the same things we said 40 years ago.
I know. And I just said to my colleagues at Bucknell, I said, if we take off the year on the documents that I still have from my time, they're saying the same thing. And
Yes,
so the challenge that we all have, and they realize it as well, is that it's time to do something different. And you can't keep on doing, that's insanity, right? Keep on doing the same thing and expecting different results.
that's right. That's
It's not
right.
going to happen.
There you
So you
go.
got to try different things. And those different things, I believe, are grounded in equity and understanding what equity is.
That is powerful. Powerful final note. I really want to thank you so much. Is there any final advice you would give to someone looking to improve their anti-racism, their cultural competence, their inclusive practice, or are there any resources, books, courses, organizations that you would recommend for them to start their learning journey or take it to the next level?
Sure. So I think the first thing I would say is to not be afraid to lean in and to ask questions that you might be afraid to ask, right? I think learning more about what equity is and is not. I always tell people that Estella Ben Simon from, well, she started out at University of Southern California, does a lot of work on what equity is and is not. I mean, you can Google her and just read about what that looks like and all of the information and why. And she had another article called Why Race Matters when it comes to equity. I
Yes,
think that all of those things are really important to ground an understanding of equity. I think it's important to be an ally to if a chief diversity officer and understand what the challenges are from that person's lens or from that office's lens, because oftentimes there's this fear that we cannot ask because it will just sound so terrible and so overwhelming that we can't deal with it, but we can,
yes,
right?
yes,
Then I think, I mean, there are books and things like that, but I honestly believe that the first step is not being afraid to just dig in and not be afraid to hold a mirror up. Like what role can I play? And don't assume what that role is. Ask.
yeah. But
I would also say the last thing is the National Association for Chief Diversity Officers in Higher Ed a few years ago authored a book, or not a book, but a journal, I guess, on really how to address or creating a framework for equity-minded work and anti-racism. And in that journal has different ways in which institutions in higher ed could look at recruitment, retention, academic success, fundraising, all of those different things. And in that chapter, I was actually one of the writers of this book. This a journal, I would say, or a workbook. But it really gives you practical examples of what you might want to think about in an institution. So it's not a textbook. It's probably 15 to 20 pages, but it gives you really good ideas about what to do as an institution.
Excellent. So that's the National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Ed,
Right.
also called NADOHE,
Yes.
NADOHE, and I believe that's their website,
Yes.
NADOHE.org.
Org.
Yes.
Yes.
Where you
Yeah, that would be a
find
good. And then also Estella Ben Simon is. I always tell people to research her and her work that she's done on equity mindedness.
Okay, wonderful. Excellent. Thank you so much. And I want to thank you for being so generous with your time, your expertise as always. Is there a way people can reach you after this? Any way they can contact you? Mm-hmm.
Sure, I can be reached at VEE001 at bucknell.edu.
Okay.
And I can give my cell phone number as well.
Well, how about not a cell phone, because that'll be out in the world, right? So how about LinkedIn? Yes, you're on LinkedIn?
Yes, you can contact me on LinkedIn,
Yes.
Vernese Edghill Walden.
Okay.
And what did you say?
I said wonderful.
Oh,
You
okay.
can say if there's another place, you can tell us, but don't give out your phone.
No, okay, I won't do that. Look, I'm telling my age now. So yeah, I would say you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn and definitely on email as well.
Yes. And I appreciate you having such a giving heart, and you're probably giving people the benefit of the doubt, but there are people out in this world that also don't mean us well. That's why I'm protecting your phone number.
Thank you.
Not from people.
I hear you.
But yes, not from people who would love to talk to you and mean you well. So I want to thank you again, and thank you to everyone who stopped by. Please subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode. And again, thank you for listening to Rooted to Thrive.